I went out to the job site and took a look at it, and I could see a visible sign of a broken solder point where the solar panel had heated up a little bit and burned through the back sheet. You could see the discoloration up there at the top of it. What I can do is I can test the voltage on the panel, and I'm able to see that the voltage is significantly less than what it should be, what it's rated to output. That would tell me that there was an issue if it was not visible. For here, it's obvious. That's a broken solder point, and the panel is going to produce less electricity. Sometimes you can't see the issue, and you can test it with a voltmeter. The other way that you can test for this is actually inspecting a system, any type of thermal camera, where you can look at the panel, why it's producing power. Is you have electricity that's flowing through the solar panel. That shade on that portion, that concentrated portion on the solar panel, is going to impede that electricity from flowing through the panel. And not only will it stop electricity flow, it creates this weird thing where it actually sucks in the flow downstream, and it creates heat and it builds up. Over time, that heat can get so bad that it will actually start to melt the panel and damage the panel. And as it does that, it just gets worse and worse and worse, and hotter and hotter and hotter. And then your panel can actually get hot enough to melt and start other things that are combustible on fire, maybe your roof. This is really interesting about solar panels because, for one, if it's bird poop on your panel, it's avoidable. You can have your solar panels inspected and cleaned to make sure that there isn't any buildup on your panel, whether it's just from dirt or a leaf or anything else. Now, this is also interesting because once there is damage on your solar panel, and once the electricity is starting to build up heat and the flow is restricted, kind of inevitable that it'll just continue to get worse and worse. It's similar to,
Warren, because rooftop fires from solar is pretty unusual.
Yeah.
What could cause it, for example, if an installer doesn't use properly rated connectors, they're called PV connectors. The National Electric Code requires us to use PV connectors that are what are called listed or designed to be used together, which typically are connectors from the same manufacturer. So you want to make sure that your installer adheres to that National Electric Code requirement.
Yeah.
One major supplier of connectors has found that up to 5% of connector failures has been due to improperly rated connectors being connected to each other. So make sure you use the listed connectors. Make sure that your installer manages the wires on the PV panels. There's wires from every panel that connect panel to panel and the panels back to your inverter. They need to be properly restrained with the proper types of stainless steel clips to the panel so they aren't dragging on the roof.
Yep.
You don't want the wire rubbing against the rough asphalt shingle, for example, and then removing the insulation and perhaps touching a metal object and arcing, because that can certainly cause a fire.
Sure.
Power surges and other lightning. The other thing I'll mention is that when your panels are installed on the roof, if you live in like a wooded area where there's lots of leaves or debris that gets on the roof, I'd strongly encourage you to ask your installer to install what's called Critter Guard. It's basically a mesh that provides a barrier between the bottom of the solar panels and the roof so that rodents can't build a nest underneath there, because if there's a nest, then you have leaves and other flammable materials kind of building up under your array. And if there was a hot spot or something like that, then you've got ignitable materials underneath there that you don't want to have there.
So that's a preventative measure.
Definitely preventative measure. Yeah.
Can solar panels catch fire in extreme heat?
I guess I'd just say no.
Okay. Yeah.
Please, I certainly appreciate the concern, but if you think about it, there are solar farms that have been installed in desert regions.
Sure.
And not just desert regions in the United States. I mean, desert regions throughout the world. There's no cases where a panel itself just got too hot and caught on fire.
So how can somebody reduce their risk from fire?
That's a great question to ask. The first thing I would say is make sure that your installer uses properly listed equipment, like connectors, like we talked about. Make sure that they use good workmanship methods when they attach the wires to the frames to keep them off the roof and away from rubbing each other. I would certainly encourage, have your installer or find a competent service company. I'd have someone come out once a year to check my system, or get up there yourself. Is there debris collecting underneath the panels, things like that, and keep it clean from that. And I'd keep up with just regular maintenance. Have someone check my system on a professional basis to make sure there's nothing else that might generate heat that could cause something to ignite and catch on fire.
Yeah.